I have not talked about I Am the Grim Reaper since October of 2019. And if that doesn't feel like a long time ago to you, then you should remember that in 2019, I didn't have to wear a face mask to go into Target and buy Cheez-its. I like face masks. Anyways, I haven't really talked about the series since episode 11. And now we're in our 70s. Oh boy, I should have made more videos on it. Something I really enjoy about I'm the Grim Reaper are the questions. It's always had some of the most intriguing, engaging, and interesting questions. Questions that I would love to find answers on, and some that I've already tried to. I mentioned that the last time I've talked about I'm the Grim Reaper was in 2019, and at that time we only had one major question. You see, in this series we follow Scarlet, our newly made Reaper. According to our good friend Satan, in life you were the worst of the worst. So much so I kept my eye on you in particular. I was gonna send you to an eternity in the 9th circle, but decided that your situation is perfect to fulfill a certain job for me. So I decided to grab you straight from judgment. A sinner like you has no chance of redemption anyways. She was apparently so bad that Satan himself kept an eye on her. Now, a major plot point is that Scarlet doesn't remember her life when she was alive. Her actions, her sins, her death, all a mystery. To herself, to the audience, and to basically everyone except Mr. Morningstar over here. Now, while I've made a video on this a while ago, and while my video may be incorrect, I still like the video enough to plug it. Boom, iCard. It is old though, so be careful with that. Now, a lot has changed in the series. Some fun connections, gangs, detectives, weirdly cute moments between a Reaper and a killer detective, but most importantly, more biblical things. And when I say biblical things, I mean things like heaven, hell, Reapers, angels, God, Lucifer, things like that. And while we barely got half of that list in the first season, the series really turned up in Season 2 and especially in Season 3, getting our first glimpses at archangels, heaven, and God, maybe. And as our series progresses, we get more and more questions. Questions on Reapers, citizens, the police, murderers, angels, heaven, hell, more. And as these questions continue to pile up, it's up to people like me, who basically have nothing better to do with their life, to find some of these answers. And one answer in particular. I mentioned God a few times, but in reality God hasn't appeared, and the flashback that he's in is questionable at best. Let me explain. Near the end of Season 2, Scarlet and Lucifer have a little bit of a disagreement, leading to a small little fight. And by small little fight, I mean Scarlet giving it her all and Lucifer having a blast, dressing up Scarlet in a dress and dancing around her. Eventually, Scarlet does catch up and slashes him down. But this does lead to Lucifer asking Scarlet why she thinks she could kill him. Why do you think you can kill me? I can't die. I was ordered by God to never die. I was the second being to ever exist. Created in the image of God, a knockoff replica. And upon my creation, I was told, you must exist beyond eternity. And at the end of eternity, you will report back to me with the answer. Finding out the question is part of the answer. And we get to see Lucifer fall from heaven, as God places his weird golden X thingy on him, burning into his skin and sending him to hell, to find the answer and the question. But before looking for the answer and the question, I guess, we need to question the validity of this conversation and this flashback. We see that this conversation was an act. He put on a sad face to lure Scarlet into trusting him a little more. And while Lucifer says it's all true, it leads us to a bigger and slightly more important topic. I mentioned a couple times heaven, hell, reapers, archangels, God, Lucifer, and whatever. But whenever I refer to these things, I call them biblical things. However, this series takes an interesting deviation from being a biblical story. Yeah, sure, Reapers are the author's own creation, and Reapers killing sinners and archangels allowing non-sinners into heaven or something like that. Not entirely sure what their job is, but also the circles of hell is something made by Dante's Inferno and not in the Bible. I'm not saying these are a problem, but it's good to establish that the series takes inspiration, but not direct influence from the Bible. Kinda like Lore Olympus. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is because of our good old friend, Satan. You see, no matter who you are, it's actually more difficult to not know his backstory. Satan, Lucifer, the morning star, the angel that thought he was higher than God himself and tried to lead a rebellion to overthrow him. Of course he fails, as God banishes him to hell. It's a simple story of pride before a literal fall from grace. And it's as connected as Lucifer as hell is connected to Lucifer. Leaving it out made me think that this origin story might have been false. However, even if his feelings were an act, I don't really think this origin story was a lie. Due to how flexible the author, Grave Reaper, is with the material, I'd say this conversation basically happened. Maybe some words or actions weren't exactly the same, but if there are two things for certain, it's that God sent Lucifer to hell, and asked him to find the answer. However, the answer to what? What question? Well, as Lucy says, finding out the question is part of the answer. So what is the question? And what is the answer? Well, it's kind of impossible to know what God wants an answer to. But I think we can narrow it down to what I think it is. And if you think it's something else, at least listen to the reasonings why I came to my question, I guess. And see if you can find a different question with the same thought process. Now, God is a strange creature. Technically speaking, God is infallible. He's perfect. But most importantly, he's omnipotent. But if God knows everything that's going on, then what question would he need an answer to? It's clearly not a question with an objectively correct answer. I think it's a much more philosophical question. Something along the lines of what is the meaning to life, but what exactly? Well, another hint is who God asked to find the answer. Lucifer. It's important to remember that if this was the original story, Lucifer wouldn't have been sent to hell straight away. Instead, he was banished as a punishment for trying to overthrow his dear old dad. But in this story, God sends Lucifer down to hell, basically right away. But why? For a job? To be in charge of hell? That makes some sense. As Lucifer said, he was created in God's image. So he's the most godlike creature out there other than God himself. However, an interesting point to raise is how God sent Lucifer to hell right after asking him for the answer and the question. It could be that God sent Lucifer to hell because it was the best place to find the answer and the question. Now, hell is filled with sinners. All types. Those who've simply skimmed a few snails off of every plate, to actual murderers and whatever the hell Scarlet is doing there. What answer could you find in the worst place possible? Why would you send him to the terribleness of hell? Well, maybe that's the point. Seeing the worst of the worst gives you a good vantage point on the worst of humanity. Remember what God said. At the end of eternity, you will report back to me with the answer. At the end of eternity, at the end of humanity, the world, everything, only then will Lucifer report the answer back to God. The answer to what, though? I was thinking something along the lines of, was it worth it? Was existence, creation, humanity itself worth it? Was the creation of a species made in his image with free will, with the option to do whatever they wanted, worth it? Why do I think this? Well, it fits the two criteria I established earlier. It's much more of a philosophical question. Asking if all of humanity is worth it is sort of like asking what the point of everything is. Not to mention, it's a question that God can't answer. At least not objectively. God created man in his image, and it mentions a lot in the Bible that he loves his creation unconditionally. It'd be difficult to judge your creation's end worth if you loved it unconditionally. And that also adds to why he asked Lucifer to find the answer. Think of it like this. If you take the worst of something and still say overall it was worth it, then it really was worth it. If Lucifer could see the worst of the worst, murderers, thieves, liars, criminals, politicians apparently, and can say that at the very end, that overall humanity itself was worth it, then it would be worth it. If he can look through all the pain that humanity has caused, all the strife, all the difficulty, all the people we've hurt, all the people we've killed, all the wars we've started, all the difficulties that we've inflicted on the earth, humanity, species, everything. If he can look back at all of that and say to God, hey, yeah, this was worth it, then it really will have been worth it. But what his answer is going to be, well, I don't really know. He's Lucifer. He's seen the worst of the worst. He's very clearly crazy. But that's just my thoughts. What about you? Do you think I'm on the right track, or do you have a different interpretation? Leave it in the comments below. But, like always, thank you for watching. I hope I'll see you next week.